still remember that evening, clear as day. It was a time when the picturesque suburb of Roseville, Northern California, was usually quiet. Most days, Roseville was just another suburb, with kids riding bikes and families walking dogs. On that fateful day, I was at home by myself. My parents had taken a short trip to visit some relatives in another state, trusting that I could manage alone. With the responsibility of the entire house to myself, I was in my element, playing video games in the living room. The blaring sounds of virtual gunfire and car races filled the room. And as the evening grew darker, the soft glow from the TV was the only light I needed. During one of the short breaks in the game, I would grab a slice of the pepperoni pizza Mom had left for me. The tantalizing aroma made me forget all about my game score. However, as engrossed as I was, an unexpected shrill ring from our old landline phone jolted me out of my gaming zone. Glancing over, I saw John flash on its tiny screen. I eagerly picked up, thinking it might be him wanting to chat about some school stuff or maybe some gaming tips. "Hey John," I chirped, but there was no answer, just an eerie stretch of silence. My heart, usually calm, started to race a little. I could only hear this faint, uneven breathing that wasn't mine. A solid minute passed, feeling much longer than it was, when John's whisper reached my ears. "Alex, did you just prank call me?" Confusion swept over me. "No, I just picked up when I saw your name. Why?" More silence. That cold feeling crept up my hands, making them feel heavy. My fingers tightened around the phone, and I rose from the couch, looking around my once familiar living room. The glow from the TV, which comforted me now, seemed to mock my sense of safety. As we tried to figure it out, a soft sound from upstairs grabbed my attention. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. We had another phone in the study. Mustering all the courage I could, I made my way to the wooden staircase. Taking each step slowly, trying to make as little noise as possible, I approached the study. Each creak of the floorboards felt like a shout in the haunting silence. With every step, my sense of dread grew. But nothing could have prepared me for what I saw when I reached the top. In the faint light filtering in through the window stood an elderly man. His back was to me, but even from that angle, I could tell something was off. His clothes looked like they'd seen better days, worn and torn in places. His posture gave away his age, a slight hunch and a general stillness. But the most unsettling part? The faint voice I heard coming from the phone he held to his ear. The same raspy breathing I'd heard earlier echoed back to me. Panic took over, and I bolted down the stairs, rushing out the front door without a second thought. My hand reached out, finding the cold metal knob of the study door, and I shut it gently. My heart was racing. My only thought was to escape. Desperation fueled my steps as I dashed through my house. I could hear the distant purring of Mrs. Patterson's cats from her home next door, a sign of some semblance of safety. The cold sensation jolted me as I stumbled on a wet patch on our walkway, reminding me that this was all too real. Mrs. Patterson's white picket fence loomed, but the gate seemed miles away. I finally reached it, throwing it open, and nearly collided with her as I barged into her house. Mrs. Patterson, her hair wrapped in curlers and surrounded by the muffled sounds of a soap opera, looked up in surprise. Recognizing my terrified state, she quickly switched off the TV, enveloping me in a comforting hug. "What's happened, Alex?" she asked, her voice both worried and soothing. Breathing heavily, I recounted my discovery. Without hesitation, she dialed the Roseville police. Within minutes, 2 cars, lights flashing but sirens silent, pulled up in front of my house. I watched from Mrs. Patterson's window as 4 officers, with determined looks, entered my home. The officers eventually emerged, leading the disheveled elderly man, his hands secured in cuffs. Officer Daniels approached us, his demeanor calm yet professional. He informed us that the intruder was Mr. Wilson, a resident diagnosed with dementia. He used to live in our house decades ago and, in his confused state, had mistaken it for his childhood home. They'd been gentle with him, understanding his condition yet taking no risks. While the police filled out their reports and Mrs. Patterson recounted her version of events, Officer Daniels sat me down, ensuring I was okay and briefing me on safety measures to consider in the future. My Life in Elmwood Avenue, Boston, was pretty ordinary. Our street was a blend of old Victorian homes and chic, modern structures. Come winter, Elmwood would transform. Houses wrapped up in soft layers of snow, the distant smoky scent from chimneys, and the occasional hum of a car breaking the icy silence. I loved our two-story house, blue as the clear sky. It had a charm that made it stand out. Inside, the aged wooden floors creaked softly, the walls adorned with a mix of modern art and vintage family photos, and a kitchen that was my haven, with its state-of-the-art appliances but a vintage charm. It was one of those cold evenings. Mark had left early that morning, mentioning some out-of-town work meeting. Alone in the house, I reveled in the peace. After some chores, I picked my favorite red mug, watching steam rise as boiling water met cocoa powder. I settled into the plush couch with my cup, enjoying the warmth against the cold window panes. Everything felt serene. My only company was the soft tunes from the radio. Until a fleeting movement outside the sliding glass door caught my eye. I strained to look, expecting maybe a stray cat. But there, near our garden shed, was a man. He was hunched, clutching a plastic bag, clearly trying to stay unnoticed. All sorts of thoughts raced through my mind. Was he a thief? A stalker? My once cozy living room suddenly felt too exposed, and every little sound seemed amplified. As much as I tried to brush it off, maybe he was just a homeless guy seeking shelter, I couldn't shake the icy fear gripping me. The moment stretched like hours, even though it was just minutes. Torn between the need to hide and the urge to confront, I hesitated. The memories of all the late-night conversations with Mark about possible break-ins and threats flooded back. I remember him always saying to call him first, no matter what. Trusting his judgment, I snatched my phone from the coffee table. My fingers, trembling with anxiety, fumbled to dial his number. But before I could hit call, a chilling text reached my screen. "Turn off the lights. Stay quiet." My thoughts raced, tangling with fears and worst-case scenarios. It felt as if the walls of our cozy home were closing in on me. However, a glimmer of hope sparked when I remembered the new security cameras Mark had insisted on installing. I quickly grabbed my tablet from the side table, launching the security camera app. The live feed showed the stranger in the backyard, and to my relief, he seemed startled, making a hasty exit towards the street. But a more sinister scene played out as I rewound the footage to a little earlier. This man had been near our bedroom window, his intentions unclear, but undoubtedly ominous. The exterior lights and the visible camera seemed to have chased him away, or so I thought. The morning sun peeked through the curtains, casting a soft glow over the room, but its warmth did little to ease the cold knot of dread in my stomach. As Mark and I sat at the breakfast table, the previous night's events cast a dark shadow over our usual light chatter. "That man," I began, my voice quivering. "Do you think he'll come back?" Mark, always the pragmatic one, rubbed his temples. "We'll do everything we can to ensure that doesn't happen. First, we must figure out what went wrong with our security." "You know, the Smiths mentioned something about upgrading their security," Mark said, breaking the silence. "Maybe we should too. And perhaps, just as an added measure, think about getting a dog, a big one." The idea appealed to me. A furry friend would provide comfort and an extra layer of protection. Later that day, we decided to call a neighborhood meeting. We felt it was essential to share our experience and find out if any of our neighbors had faced something similar. The living room was filled with familiar faces from Elmwood Avenue. The coffee table was laden with cookies, chips, and cups of tea, but the atmosphere was thick with tension. Mrs. Jones, from 2 houses down, recounted an incident when she thought she saw someone lurking around her backyard. Mr. Smith spoke about strange cars he'd noticed parked for long hours. The stories flowed, each one adding to our collective concern. We decided it was high time we looked out for one another. Ideas were thrown around. We explored every option, from setting up neighborhood patrols to installing more security cameras. In 2017, my teenage life took an unexpected turn when my parents left me home alone for the first time. I was excited about the freedom, though their strict safety guidelines were drilled into my head. "Stay safe, keep everything locked, and no strangers." they reminded. The initial few hours felt liberating. I lounged in our quiet home watching shows and snacking. However, as darkness approached, odd noises emerged from the outdoors. They sounded like footsteps and faint murmurs, unsettling my peace. I tried to dismiss these sounds as mere figments of my imagination. Boosting the TV's volume, I tried to drown out the unsettling ambiance. Despite my efforts to put the strange noises out of my mind, I couldn't help but feel a lingering sense of unease as I prepared for bed. I double-checked that all the doors and windows were locked, and then I curled up under the covers, hoping for a peaceful night's sleep. The morning sun streamed into the living room, waking me from an uneasy sleep filled with strange dreams. I brushed off the remnants of sleep, deciding to start my day. That's when I noticed him. A man I hadn't seen before was standing outside the house opposite mine. He wasn't doing anything in particular, just standing there, staring intently at my home. Each time I tried to get a better look, he would tactically move out of sight. It felt unsettling. The constant feeling of being observed made the spacious house feel small and claustrophobic. I decided I needed to do something and protect myself. I locked all the doors and windows, double-checking each one to ensure my safety. My heart raced as I heard a bang on the door. I peeked out from the window, but no one was there. As the day turned to evening, I noticed that the man often lurked around my house, even at odd night hours. It felt like he was always there, watching my every move, waiting for the right moment to strike. I tried to convince myself that it was all in my head, but the evidence was mounting and becoming impossible to ignore. With each passing moment, my anxiety and fear grew. I felt trapped, suffocated by the unseen presence that seemed to be closing in on me. I knew I needed help, but who could I turn to? My parents were still out of town. In order to ignore creepy incidents, I decided to watch some TV. I turned on the local news channel and was shocked to see a breaking news report. Displayed on the screen was the mugshot of a notorious criminal who had recently escaped from prison, and he bore a striking resemblance to the man who had been watching my house. I felt my stomach drop as the reporter explained that the escape was considered extremely dangerous and was known for a series of violent home invasions. Suddenly, it all made sense. The man had been observing my house and waiting for the perfect chance to break in, but I was not sure. That night, as the darkness crept in, my senses were on high alert when I heard the sound of glass shattering downstairs. The man had finally decided to break into my house. My heart raced and I quickly hid in my bedroom closet. As I huddled there in the darkness, I managed to pull out my phone and dial 911. I whispered my address and the situation to the operator, who assured me that the police were on their way. All I could do now was wait and hope that they would arrive in time. I could hear the criminal searching through the house, his footsteps approaching my hiding spot. I held my breath, praying he wouldn't find me before the police arrived. Finally, I heard the sound of sirens approaching, and the man's footsteps suddenly grew more frantic. The police burst through the front door, shouting orders for the criminal to surrender. I could hear a struggle, and then the sound of handcuffs clicking into place. Relief washed over me as I realized they had apprehended the man before he could find me. My legs trembled as I emerged from my hiding spot and tears streamed down my face. I knew that I had narrowly escaped a terrible fate, and I was incredibly grateful for the timely intervention of the police. When my parents finally returned home, they were visibly relieved to find me safe and sound. They had heard about the escaped criminal on the news and were horrified to learn that he had been stalking our home. We hugged each other tightly, thankful that the terrifying ordeal was finally over.
Thank you for watching. If you want to support our channel, don't forget to hit the subscribe and like button.